Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Conversations about Art. My name is Alan Constant. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm here with Duane Toops, who lives in Melbourne, Florida. Today, we're going to be talking to Dawn Surratt. She is a mixed media artist who lives in Henderson, North Carolina. So I'd like to welcome you, Dawn.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Well, I'm so glad you're willing to participate in our little series.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for
Great.
asking. Yeah.
So I'd like to start the conversation by asking you about your background in art, how you got started, if you have any education, and just tell us how you got to where you are.
Sure. I have loved art since I was very little, taken art lessons from very young, and then got the opportunity to go to school for art in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is about middle of the state. I went to the University of North Carolina in Greensboro and got a studio art degree there. And then shortly after I got that, I got married and moved to Georgia and lived in Georgia for about 10 years. While I was there, my father passed away suddenly when my daughter was about a year old. And I went back to school and got a social work degree and a master's in social work and began working in hospice. I found that it was something that I felt very led to do at the time. And so I made art more of a hobby at that point a, for those 10 years, and then moved back to North Carolina, worked for hospice. It's a very taxing job. It's a very intense job, and I loved it, and I still do. But I got to the point where I needed to shift down a little bit. So my art started to pick up, and I began to find avenues to explore with my art, and then left hospice social work in 2012, I think it was. And so from that time, I've been a full-time artist. So I do a little bit of teaching here and there. I do mentoring, um, and and mostly just play in the studio. So, and I've been living here back in this part of the state of North Carolina for about 14 years. That's a little bit about my education experience and kind of where I hopped around. I studied a lot of different mediums. I can't stick to one thing. I think I would say that I am a photographer first and foremost. I think that would be my first choice, maybe. But I also, I've played with a lot of other mediums and enjoy incorporating them back in. So when photography went to out of the dark room into digital, I found that I needed to use my hands, and so I've been exploring ways to incorporate the photography in more object type responses. And that's what's led me to this work that I've been doing for a while now. And a lot of that, it's working with hands, but it's also to layering images and, dabbling into collage now because I really enjoy it. I'm trying to learn it and trying to feel comfortable with it. Some days are better than others. I can't marry to one way of working. It's important for me to keep pushing and exploring out and experimenting and just playing with what different things can do and how I can, achieve what I'm trying to say through different mediums.
It all sounds good. Do you sell through a gallery or do you sell to collectors?
I don't have a gallery right now. I just pulled work from a gallery, so I am gallery-less. I generally don't go that route. I really am more interested in being able to show when I can. So I'm not full bore into that professional bent of getting a gallery and getting the work out there and all. It's much more of a just when the opportunities come. I'm not I'm really bad about putting myself out there. I really don't do that too much. When I do, I'm very fortunate that I've been able to get opportunities that way and be able to show my work and get it out there. But I don't have a gallery right now, no. Whenever I have the opportunity to have a show, it is definitely a place where I want to invite a viewer in to participate, to be able to either write something or some kind of a ritual that lets them be able to put whatever they are experiencing into a place for it to feel like they participated in it as well. So it's not as much it's me putting the work out there, but it's also with the expectation to collaborate with the viewer as well in some way. Like, come on, it's this isn't a vacuum, where we all get from one another. So here, here, if you choose, come here, take a look if you want, and then leave with, whatever you would like, because I think that's really important. And I think people aren't given the space and the time to be able to sit with something. And especially if it brings up something for them internally, for whatever depth that might be, they're not able to put it in, it's just such a fast-paced world. We don't get a chance to just put it somewhere. So,
Well, I think we whet the appetite of our viewers enough, and I think we need to end the suspense and look at your work. So let's take a look at it now. So Dawn, the first piece we're going to look at, it's called Embodiment. And I'm glad you mentioned you're primarily a photographer because this is obviously photographic based.
it is.
So is this an idea you had before you put this together, or did it come together and you developed your ideas you went along?
This is a digital collage of a found object. The woman's head is the found photo, and the top part where the steel store is an image of mine. I think at this point with this image, I was kind of clicking along with this idea. So I had montaged another barn over this face, and I started to think about just the different ways that the face could be combined with other elements of other photographs of mine. And this was part of the Silent Year project, which I did during COVID. And it quickly became clear to me that these could be metaphors for adjusting to change and trauma and grief that we go through internally. So her face is the same through the entire project, but what's different is the elements that she's combined with. Each of those elements then become a metaphor for different kinds of feelings and processes. It's kind of loosely based on Jung's archetypes, but not really. And so I developed 22 of these images of this woman, then called them different processes. So it's embodiment, there's alchemy, there's discordia, I forget all of them. The very first one that I did from the series was Discordia. That was the one with the barn on there. And I think there's another image that I sent you, Alan, that's got all of the archetypes together in one. And then it just became a really interesting way to talk about the fact that we stay consistent on the outside, but what we go through internally then changes, to bring that internal change outward and to show what that might even be like. It was a really fun project, and it gave me something to hold on to during a really crap year, and made sense of the ways that we were thinking about the whole world at that time and how we adjust to this whole new world that we were facing.
I assume you're using Photoshop to do this?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I think the way you combined the building with the face was so well done. I didn't know how you did it. And I know Photoshop pretty well. You did a great job of putting them together like that.
Thank you. The building is actually a store that, I live very, very close to Virginia, the Virginia border. And what's really fun is to go shooting up in Southern Virginia because it's very, very rural. Came across this beautiful, it's completely steel. It's really patinaed beautifully. And I'm very drawn to that and have shot it many times over the years just because it's beautiful. But there's a long history with that. And it just was easy to combine with the face because of the patina of the store. It just blended in really well. So there's a lot of layers in this. I do tend to work in Photoshop with a lot of layers. You probably see little scratches in there and that's a photo of grasses that my husband took that I love. And I just layer that over into like a soft overlay. And then a lot of erasing and a lot of blending and that. I'm not a Photoshop expert by any stretch, but was enough to be able to photo montage these in a way that helped them seem fairly seamless. And then just erasing out and softening her up a whole bunch because the original image of her is very, very contrasty and it's is in sepia tones. And I have it somewhere, but she's really got a big bow on the top of her head and a lot of curls and stuff. So it was a lot of painstaking erasing and blending and cloning all of that stuff out to try to get it to a place where I could start blending these other images onto her and it look like like they belong together.
What I'm interested in, especially because you mentioned early on that you can't be married to one way of working. You need your hands in a lot of mediums, and so it makes me curious how it is you start a piece. Does every piece start differently as well, or do you have like some kind of particular recurring workflows that you revisit, especially as it might relate to even a piece like this? Where would you normally start?
I always start with a photograph. That's always the number one. And then start searching around for materiality from there. I usually work in various different mediums so that I'll have kind of like a tickler file. So if I want to do object work, I'll have various things that I'm considering. But the photograph is the main, that's where I start from always to decide if it would lend itself to a collage or a object or a transfer or whatever I'm thinking about. I kind of have to let it speak to me. And then I start grouping it together with different elements to see how they're fitting together or if they're fitting together. Size is also another consideration with it too. The substrate that the photograph's on, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, and I need to change that out and maybe do it on something different. It always does start with the image. And then from there, it happens generally from what I'm working on at the time. So in this project, the materials of Don't Kill Me, but ripped up books and things like that, the leather, the mull from the spine and all of those, the silk on this, those are all things that I'm working with. So those are all going to be my first reach things, but generally I have a variety of things, different types of metals and woods and things like that I'll grab for.
Now, one of the things I'm curious about, you use a lot of your own photographic work as well. When you're using your own photos, do you tend to have them like pre-printed and ready for collaging, or when you're using your own photos, do you tend to work more digitally? Or what is the deciding factor between being analog and being digital?
I guess I work with a marriage of both digital and analog because the images are all digital images, but they're printed analog. So, and I will print various sizes of them. So if there's an image that I just took that I'm really wanting to play around with, I'll print it off on a lot of different sizes so that gives me a lot of opportunity to see how it's fitting with other things. And then if it still feels off, then I'll print it on a different kind of paper, or I'll make a transfer of it, or I'll age the image, the print itself, because it's not marrying well to the object or the substrate, just trying to get it to fit and just to see how it fits. And I really do work for a little bit and then leave it alone and then come back to it a lot. I don't like set off to do something and then just plow through it and get it done. I have a lot of breathing space between where I first start something and then continue to work on it.
This piece is called Semantic Memory. I look at this piece and I see the numbers, and the numbers look like some kind of measuring device. And so to me, this piece speaks of time and memory. Is that your intent here? Or if it's not, tell us what you're intending to do here.
It's definitely time and memory, but it's also to trying to orient between what is time and what is memory. This whole project, this Real But Not True project, is about disorientation, basically. It's about trying to decipher between the feelings that we have as we react to the world around us or things that we're facing, the reality of what those things truly are. So all of these collages or works are about the tension that you feel and trying to orient and write and find what's real and what's true. So the timeline there is there to suggest true time and true measurement and all of those things, but it's also too elusive as well because it stops, it doesn't continue on, it's transparent and all of those things. And she's even behind a piece of mica. So there's further depth there away from that and her struggling to come up into the reality of the situation.
You said earlier that you're trying to learn collage. You've learned it. This feels like a very sophisticated use of collage. And there's nothing about this piece that does not work for me.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate you saying that. I struggle a lot with when to stop with collage, not to overwork it, and also to keep it fresh. So that's what I've been working on with that. I want to do collage better for sure. I'm continuing to push myself in that direction.
Well, if this is a result of struggle, please keep struggling.
I will struggle, believe me. And hopefully I will struggle in a good way.
No, you are struggling in a good way. We need to keep moving though. So
Yeah, I before we go any further, I definitely want to pick up on what Alan said. I think there's a very clear stylistic through line throughout all of your work. I think it's very, very palpable and tangible that your fingerprints are on all of your work. To echo what Alan said, that struggle of finding it is present, and that is itself, the fingerprints of you all over it. So I can praise you for that highly. You talked a lot about time and memory, and what is that a common theme throughout all of your work, or is that particular to just maybe that series? Because it seems like that's something that is also a through line that I'm seeing conceptually, that there's this certain thing about wear and erosion and resiliency and survival, and about remnants of what remains after the passage of time, and understanding what that means as things are proven to be more ephemeral and evolving and growing.
Yeah, the ephemerality is really interesting to me too. And also too how we remember things. I think it can't help but be something that I am always going to bring forth in my work because it's kind of how I'm wired, but I am very conscious of the tweeness of nostalgia and the getting lost in nostalgia. So I try to keep an eye on that and to make sure that it's more about the feeling of longing and loss rather than things were better in a certain time and they're not now. And if that makes any sense, we can tend to idolize nostalgia a lot. I think that if we can take a step back from that and see it a little bit more clearly for what it is and not get too caught up in that and making art, so that we are still pushing forward and we are still moving ahead in what we're trying to say and how we're making our art.
I think that hits a lot of key points for me as I'm looking at your work, because there's certainly a great sense of age and a sense of time's passage, obviously, and there's this sense of things that are from the past in your work, and so there is that feeling of nostalgia. But for me, when I'm looking at your work, I'm not seeing so much a nostalgia for the past or a nostalgia for things that have gone by. It's almost as paradoxical it sounds, so it makes sense that you're talking about the tension. It's almost a nostalgia for the present, or maybe even a nostalgia for the future.
Yeah, that really does speak to me. And you're much more eloquent than I am to be able to say that. But it is true. Again, it's the simultaneous of the future, the present, and the past together and how they fit. And that one is not more important than the other, but they all have their place and they all move around us all the time. And like this piece, this is called The Height and Weight of Men. And it was due to some text that I found in that. But really, what this is about is leveled properties around we live in a rural area too. And anytime you go out shooting anywhere, you'll see large swaths of land that have been leveled. This was one of them, and they left this structure here, just thinking about the weight that the land carries, that man can invoke on the environment, and we carry that, but yet we can still do something about that in the present and the future as well. So it's the integration of all of those things.
I don't know if there's a specific title, but I had this labeled collage and handmade book. I was thinking about the work you do where you put together books. So I've seen you do it in other pieces. We'll look at some other stuff with that too. And I was thinking a book is almost like a unit of measurement itself, whether it has words or not. It could contain a story that has movement through time or whatever. So I look at this and you're combining a photograph with a handmade book or a collage with a handmade book. So how did you come up with this idea?
I use that frequently. I am a bookmaker, and I like to use the symbol of a book to talk about untold stories, stories of the future, stories of the past. None of them have any text inside of them when I'm using them as a element in a collage or an assemblage. I just really like that idea of the pattern, the repetition of the pages, the tactility of it. It's just interesting to me. And I don't remember the title of this piece either, to tell you the truth. But the image above is a pair of hands from a little girl that I shot many years ago. I just like the idea of the fact that she could choose to open this book or not. The book is open, the book is there for her. Whether or not she opens that up and marries to the stories or not is just up kind of for the viewer to decide, for the viewer to respond to. So this is also on a cover, a book board, and I like the torn edges a lot. One of the things that I try to stay away from is defining myself by straight edges, and I do a lot of box assemblages, but I'm always consciously aware of hemming myself or boxing myself in and trying to push beyond that some too and soften it and trying to keep the tension with that as well. So the threads hang off to the side and there's torn edges on one side. And I think that helps tell the story a little bit better.
And we've talked quite a bit about time, memory, past time, future time, all that. I think the one word that comes to me is that I think your work is timeless. I think it's outside of time. And somehow you've managed to step outside of time and create something that goes beyond time.
Well, thank you. I think whenever you are speaking in languages of emotion, if you're creating through emotion, that it can feel timeless because it's not anchored in anything but feeling. That's where I build my work from, is feeling how I felt at the time and how I feel as I'm making it.
That makes sense.
Mm.
And we're going to keep moving.
So one of the things I'm really interested about, at least from a practical level or procedural level, maybe even, is that you mentioned earlier on that you will age your own photos. What is that process like? How do you go about that?
It depends on the piece. So this piece, there is some tea stain in here, and I think a lot of times I will tea stain paper, will not tea stain an image. But what I do with images, if they are digitally printed, I haven't done this with found objects much, but back in the day, we used to hand paint on resin coated images when you'd print them in the dark room. That would seal the image in. So we can't do that with digital now. So you have to seal it with some like with matte medium or something like that. So that's what I'll do. And then on top of that, I'll use things like oil pastels and colored pencils, things like that, and cold wax. And so you can actually make different tones with the cold wax. I can sandpaper the edges, and then there's hemp paper that I stained, and the strips on the left, that's acrylic paint that I used on a gel plate that I was just pulling off of and then stripping for different emphasis.
One of the things you mentioned early on that I'd like to bring us back to grief. And I think that's something that does come out in your work. There's a certain sense of, as you said, a yearning and an absence and a longing. How does that feel for you in your work, or what is that theme? How does it play out? What are you looking for when you explore that?
I spent a long time trying to isolate the hospice grief work that I was doing from my art. And then the light bulb went on and said, "This is how you're wired. There's really nothing you can do in terms of teasing that out." But really, what it comes down to is a reverence. One of the things that you learn when you're working with folks who are facing life-altering illnesses is the reverence of life and the reverence of the beauty of love and family and all of those things. And it forever alters how you live your daily life. You're definitely living, but you also know the fleetingness of life and how short life is and how quickly things can change. So I think that whenever I'm choosing subjects to photograph or put pieces together, it's always a nod, I guess. It's like a memento mori, really, all the time. There's just a nod to life, a reverence and a gratitude for it. Does that answer your
It
question?
does. As a matter of fact, as I was listening to everything that you had to say, a thought that was occurring to me is one that you literally just said. It seems to me like you're not simply exploring grief on its own, or and not exploring grief on its own sake. You're actually simultaneously pairing grief and gratitude as dance partners rather than as antagonisms.
Yeah, because that's what we do in life, right?
Mm.
You learn to carry the sorrow and you learn to carry the happiness. And that's the dance. And the old, when you get old like me, that becomes more and more tender. The more we have to learn how to carry both of those and carry them with absolute joy, and that we have the privilege to be able to do that. And that gets tricky sometimes. It really does. But it's a very important thing to try to navigate in art and life,
That becomes its own act of reverence. Yeah,
and its own practice and its own ritual. Yeah.
absolutely. That's beautiful. Let's go
Thank
ahead
you.
and move on to the other piece.
Moving on. Oh, so this is the piece you're talking about, the same image of the woman with different types of renditions.
Right, Alan. That's the entire series there. So the names of each of the archetypes is under each one. And so what I decided to do was to develop it into a card deck. I designed the back of the cards and had them printed and laminated, and then did a little book that talks about each of the archetype. Just nothing, it's not a tarot deck, it's not an oracle deck, it's not any of those kind of things. It's just something for meditation purposes or something to kind of ponder if you wanted to. And so that's kind of clearly written in the book. And then the keywords for each image felt like it was a nice vessel to put all of those in as a portable little way of taking with you. It's proven to be very successful, so I've been very happy with that.
One of the things you just mentioned that stuck out to me is you mentioned as you were creating those cards, you saw them as kind of objects of meditation. That resonates for me as another maker because I always think about my collaging time as a contemplative practice, as my own form of meditation, because it is an exercise in attention and awareness, observing that what happens on my desk is also bringing up things in me. And as as a piece falls into the right place, it feels like a piece of me falls into the right place too. And I'm constantly discovering myself as I'm discovering the work. And I can't help but wonder if that's what it's like for you, but also if that's part of your need for the tactileness of the work.
Yeah, it definitely is because as you know, Dwayne, when you work that way, you fall into kind of a zen, right? You let the energy of creating kind of come through you, right? And you get to that point where it just you're not aware of time or anything. You're just in this place. And I couldn't do that digitally. I mean, I need to use my hands to get to that place. And I like what you said that it was like a piece of you falling in place. I think that is true for me as well.
There's a great passage from a writer named Madeline L'Engle, and she says that when the artist is the servant of the work is better than the artist. And I really try to live by that. And it seems like I can see that in your work too, where you're letting the materials guide your choices. You're letting the materials inform you what it wants to be.
Especially to objects and papers and all they have that energy, and so they've been touched many times before, and then so that feeds, right? And then you take that and you add to it your energy of working with it as well, and it just begins to build into something. And a lot of times I'll tell people, if you're looking at papers, or if you're looking at images, or if you're looking at objects and they're bigger than what you might maybe want to say, then you need to put them down for a while and live with them for a while, and then come back to them when they have less meaning, or you perceive them in a different way than you did maybe when you first got them and kind of fell in love with them, right? Because we're all like guilty of that. Like, we'll get like a pristine new notebook and we'll be afraid to write something in it because it's just so perfect, right? But then the minute you make a mark in there, it takes the pressure off, and it makes it okay then to express yourself. And then once you start expressing yourself and letting go of any outcome of that, then more good stuff starts to come in. Not always, but a lot of the time. I mean, it's the emphasis on the process rather than the outcome.
For me as well. I couldn't agree more.
So this is your rolling cart of art, which I love. I just love the whole concept. I think you've done a few of these, correct?
I have, yeah. Yeah, I have.
And how big is the cart?
I think it's 20 inches tall, maybe 12 inches wide, something like that.
How did you come up with this idea?
I don't know. I don't, I mean, again, that was just something that kind of built. I love the idea of the library cart when I was a kid, and the fact that you could take books and stories with you wherever you went, and the wheels just really something animating something like that just really appeals to me. And so I found those wheels and I started playing with them and building different boxes with it rather than just keeping it with one box. I thought, well, let's just like try different things in there, different elements. And it was just one of those things that just kind of fell into place for me when I didn't really know what I was doing. And I didn't know about the image for this piece, but then that one kind of leapt out to me because, the feet and the legs and the wheels and all of that. And that's a montaged image of mine. The legs are found, that's a found photograph. And then the clouds and the road and all of that is from something I shot out west. And so I started thinking about those three pairs of legs, and then it's the story of this started to build from that. So I made all those little books that go inside there, and it's the story, it's the three fates. So that's kind of what this is based on, basically. And then the hands with the book, or the pages in between them in the bottom, is again how we tell our stories and how stories unfold and how we embrace our stories and how we marry to the things that we remember and the things that we say and the things that we know about ourselves and our memory.
Well, in a piece like this, I also see the influence of Joseph Cornell. I mean, it's not exactly what he did, but I definitely see his style in here.
Yeah, I think Joseph Cornell's whimsical boxes will always be a starting point for any artist who likes to build assemblages and things like that through boxes, just because he just was so seminal in taking that idea across. It's a cross between a photograph and a book object, really. I kind of sometimes live in that fine line between book objects and photography. And I like that, I like dancing between all of those. So I think this lends more towards probably being a book object.
Okay, let's go to the last piece.
I forgot about this piece.
Before we get into this one, because I feel like there's literally a journey that we can go on through this piece. But there was something that you mentioned. You didn't use this word specifically, but you were talking about a kind of preciousness about the materials, the way you make that mark in the notebook and suddenly it's less precious and that makes it more usable. I'm curious as to if you have any preciousness about the work once it's finished.
Oh no, I don't at all. Not one bit. I really don't. And I cannot tell you, Duane, how many things I have ripped apart after I've built them. They hang around for a little while and then, yeah, they're gone. I mean, like even one of the things that you pulled out, like that one image of the creek that I shot and that collage, that, like I said, that's no longer. So, no, I don't. One of the things that's just hilarious to me is how I'll be slinging stuff around in the studio and just like throwing stuff at it, falls on the floor, whatever. And then you hand it to a gallery, for a show or something, and they put on the white gloves and they take it and it's all, very careful. And I thought, if you knew what I was doing to these pieces, you kind of laugh at it because there's no. I have a lot of people ask me about archivalness. I mean, I'm not putting things together that I know that are going to fall apart, but also too, life is ephemeral, nothing lasts forever. I'm okay with that. I really am.
In the
Yeah.
Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they make these vastly intricate sand mandalas with
Yeah.
so much great detail, and it will take them weeks on end to complete one. But then the moment it's finished, they sweep up all the sand into a silk cloth and return the sand back to the river. And I just can't think of anything more beautiful than that.
Me neither. And I've seen them do that and it's amazing.
Oh,
And
I can
and
only
I,
imagine.
oh, it's incredible.
Yeah, so with that being said, I feel like there is genuinely, in all of your work, I feel like there's a tremendous sense of narrative and history and story, which I can sense it so much more tangibly in a piece like this. I feel like there is genuinely, we are looking at a narrative arc. Was it like that for you in putting this together? Is that something you had in mind, or did that just develop through the process?
I love working this way. The very first one of these that I ever did was called Memento Mori, and it was speaking about grief and how nonlinear grief is, right? So, we talk about grief in stages, and they're not really stages, they're emotions. We all feel them, and we feel them at any time. So, wherever you came to that piece to start first to look at it was where you were at, and it was to echo our grief work and how we move through grief. As I started to do more and more of these, I love doing these because it is entirely up to the viewer to be able to take that journey through it and to glean what they want from whatever this is telling them. And it's fascinating to hear what things it brings up for people and what they tell me that they see through it. And they're all so very, very different. Again, it's taking, as much as of your ego out of it and putting something forward for somebody then to kind of invite them in and let them enjoy the experience of seeing art in their individual manner. And I really love that. So this was commissioned from the Maine Museum Photography. They asked if I would do one of these. So I didn't have any set theme for this. I just pulled bits and pieces together that seemed to kind of work, being able to give it the space of being able to come around and up. And so you're looking at it on a lot of different levels, right? You're looking at it kind of how it balances on the wall, but you're also looking at it too in terms of the shapes of the things. There's everything on there from a flag book to there's a metal ring in there. There's a little box that has papers spilling out of it. There's accordion, there's transfers, there's a whole bunch of different things in there. It's just a fun way to tell a lot of different stories.
So you just had all these mounted on the wall?
They're all mounted on the wall and they're mounted with pins, with entomology pins. And then, so then the pins then cast shadows and they also become an element to the work itself as well.
There's a great book by John O'Donohue called Eternal Echoes, and have you read it? Oh,
Yeah.
it's a
I
beautiful
love John
book.
O'Donohue.
Oh, it's
Why
so
did he
good.
go? Why did he go? Why did he
The
go?
world isn't the same without
It
him.
isn't.
Um,
I just love him so
um,
much.
but
Yeah.
in that book, there's a portion where he's talking about grief. He kind of hints at the non-linearity of it but also saying that there is kind of a sure rhythm to it. And he says that during that period, you are literally having to swim against the tide of your life, and there are points when you feel like you're advancing and yet the tide comes out or in and you end up further back than you thought you were, or you're pulled down. And as you were talking about that, and as I was thinking of that quote, I couldn't help but notice there is what seems almost like a very clear wave-like pattern in that piece. And I wonder if that's something that you recognized in the making, or kind of more of an afterthought.
It was an afterthought. Just intuition, just, again, just putting yourself out of it and trying to let the divine spark just come through you as much as you can without interfering with it. I mean, that's the name of the game. Yeah. But no, I didn't really recognize that. I did one piece, one of these collages for the wall that had like, I think it had over 300 pieces to it. And I was in a show called Murmuration, and there's like 7 other artists in the show. And I said, I'd like to do one of these pieces. Would you, if you want to share an object or a photograph or anything that you would like to be included in this, if you trust me with it, I'd like to include it in this installation. And so everybody gave me, things that had meaning for them. And I tried to do it with the intention, as a murmuration would do, to come up and then out. But, as all things go, it had its own energy and it did its own thing. But it was just so fun to put those pieces up there and just to let them speak to you as you're doing that, and let go of whatever and then stand back, because that piece actually covered 3 walls. So I started in the middle and it went around to through one corner and then around the back of one wall. So it took people all the way around. So I think even if I had tried to make that, a certain way, I mean, I don't know if it would have come out that way. It's just got to be in the moment. It's just got to be what it is.
So this piece does not exist anymore. It just existed for the brief time that was in the museum.
Yeah. Yep. And then, on a practical note, it got a little tricky because some people, like, when I've done these installations, there's a few pieces that really speak to them that they want to maybe purchase. So then it's like, what do you do there? Do you like, how does that work? Like, how do you price something like that? Then how do you, like, yes, you can have these pieces, of course, but like, how does that even work? That was an interesting foray into how to let people have pieces of that if they wanted to. But I haven't done one of these in a while, but I really love making them. I've made quite a few of them. Talk about just being in the moment with the process. You should try it, Duane. Like, just take some of your collages and put them up on the wall. Just let them kind of speak to you in terms of their space and where they're going to live and how they're going to relate to each other. It's just so fun.
I can't thank you enough for your time and your transparency and just your candor,
Sure.
and the softness and the kindness that you bring to the conversation and your work.
Thank you.
One thing that I would love to ask, as we wrap up, because it's one of the things that I'm always curious about, is do you have any rituals for your process or for your studio or for anything that has to do with your work?
I don't have anything set that I can think of, but I will tell
Okay.
you that the way that I do work is very, very slow. It's very
Mhm.
intentional. It's very slow. And I don't, if I finish a piece and it's been a week, that's a freaking miracle, basically, because I really work slow. I think, Alan, you said, wow, you're really prolific, and I'm really not prolific. I've just been doing it a long time. When it's a gloomy day, I light a candle. Periodically have to smudge this place because, bad juju and all that. I give myself a lot of space and time to work. And that, I think, is a very important ritual for every artist to do. So
But working slow does not mean you're not prolific.
true, but if I were a faster worker, I would have a hell of a lot more work than I do.
You're
So,
you're plenty prolific. So,
absolutely. Thank
but on
you.
that note, I think we really need to end the conversation.
It's
But
been such a pleasure to talk to you both. Thank you so much for having me today,
thank
Tom.
you so much for participating. I'm always amazed when I ask somebody whose work I really love to participate and they say yes. It's like, oh my God, it's like we get to do this. So it's a lot of fun for me. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this for me, but also for all the artists that, you guys are putting awareness onto, and what a great thing for the community. So thank you for that. Appreciate that so
Thank
much.
you, Don.
All right.